Welcome to part 3 of chapter 4 lecture. We're still exploring data with graphs, and for this particular lecture we are going to use SPSS to analyze data by creating histograms, bar charts, and scatter plots. So first, let's go to additional resources where we will find the data sets for this particular chapter. I'm not going to go through each and every example. I'm just going to focus strictly on those 3 graphs. So for this particular example, for histograms, I'm going to go through the example from the book. Let's look at Jiminy Cricket. All we have to do is click on the data set, and now it's opening up in SPS. It's a little slow sometimes. So here is our data set. Now these are all of the participants. There's just an ID number next to each one. Here is the strategy that they are using. Remember, there's 2 strategies that the book talked about. They either they felt that their success was due to either hard work or wishing on a star. Now notice there's one here. It's labeled as 1 or 0. So then, okay, so how am I supposed to know which strategy they owe their success to? Remember, if we go to variable view, I can look at that particular variable strategy, and remember in values here, because this is where we do our grouping, it shows what these values mean. So 0, people felt that it was wished upon a star, or 1 was due to hard work. So we can just click OK. I'm going back to my data view, so now I know which strategy is which. Here is their baseline level of success, and here is their level of success after 5 years. So let's create a histogram for this. Remember, histograms we use for continuous data. Here is our numerical data that we want to analyze, our interval data. So let's go to Graphs, then Chart Builder, and we are going to select histograms here, and we are going to create a simple histogram. Notice all I did was just I just passed my arrow over this illustration and it showed a simple histogram. So I'm going to double click, and this shows just a preview of what it's going to look like. This is without the actual variables. So all we have to do now is drag and drop the variables that we want to analyze. So we want to analyze post-success. So post-success, we're going to look at after. So we're going to drag this to the x-axis. I want to see their level of success, their post level of success. So this shows everyone's level of success after their intervention. So once we have this preview, we can close this out, and when we click OK,
it's going to pull it up in our output. And this is what their level of success after intervention looks like. Now you can see it's pretty lumpy. There's a peak of scores at about 50 here. Okay, it's on the midpoint of the scale. There's quite a few scores at the high end and a fewer scores at the low end. So what if we want to compare the distributions of several groups? We can do more than one group, and we can use a population pyramid in order to complete that. So if we go back to Graphs, Chart Builder, here is our icon for population pyramid. I can double click on population pyramid, and this is what's going to come up. So now we can look at two different groups here. So the two groups we want to look at are the strategies, the two different strategies. So let's select strategy for success. We're going to move this over to our right here where it says split variable. We're going to move strategy for success here. So like that, it can plot the different distributions. So this is, people feel that their strategy for success was either due to wishing upon a star or for hard work. Let's go ahead and close this out. We also need to place our distribution variable here, which will be level of success after. Remember, we're looking after the intervention has happened, because we need both that x and that y axis. And notice, before we placed the level of success, OK was grayed out. So you always need that x and that y for the program. So when I place back the level of success after intervention, I can click OK. And now here are my two groups. Now notice our population pyramid. So those who wished upon a star, notice it's a fairly normal distribution. So if you draw a line down the center, both sides would probably be a mirror image of each other. So we would say it's pretty symmetrical. We would say that it's a pretty normal, fairly normal distribution. So there were actually a small group who managed to be successful just by wishing, okay? But most end up as being fairly average. However, look at this side, those who attributed their success due to hard work. Now this side is actually skewed. We have a skewed distribution where a large proportion of the people become very successful. So look at these levels of success. So much more people became successful due to hard work, and fewer people around the midpoint. Okay? So a population pyramid is a good way if you're wanting to look at two specific groups. So we looked at a histogram for continuous data. Now let's look at a bar chart that will analyze our categorical data.
So we can go back to, our Blackboard. And now we're going to use this file right here, ChickFlick. Okay, so we're looking at gender here, 1 and 2. So if we go to variable view, 1 denotes male, 2 female. We have the name of the films. We have 2 different films. 1 is the Bridget Jones Diary, 2 is Memento. And our third variable is arousal. So basically they're looking at gender. They're looking to see who enjoyed the film more, basically. Did men enjoy the chick flicks more, or did women enjoy the chick flicks more, based on their arousal scale? So we have one grouping variable here. So we're going to look at one grouping variable here. We're going to look at film first in order to create a simple bar chart. So let's go to Graphs, Chart Builder, and we have bar chart here, and we're going to double click on Simple Bar Chart. We have our y-axis and our x-axis. So the y-axis needs to be the dependent variable. What did we measure in this case? We measured their arousal. So arousal is actually going to go here. And one thing that I want you to be careful with, because the book says that the default statistic is going to be mean, but my version of SPSS, the default is just count. So make sure that the statistic is on mean, because if it's on count, your graph is going to look very, very different. So we have first we're going to place psychological arousal in the y-axis. And then we're going to place the name of the film in our x-axis, because the x-axis should be the variable that we want to split up. Remember, our movie, the name of the film is in 2 groups, so we want to compare the mean of each of those groups. So all I did was just drag it to the x-axis. Now notice, so if we click OK, this is going to give us our bar chart. What if we double click on our bar chart? Actually, let's go back. Let's go back here, this window right here. So this is the preview. We have our mean, we have our name of our film. Now we can actually display the error bars. So remember in chapters 1 and 2, when you calculated the confidence intervals for the fingerlings, you were looking at 95%, you were 95% confident that the length fell between this length and this length. Well, SPSS can do the confidence intervals for you, which is really nice. So notice, if I click on display error bars, and if I click on confidence intervals, and we can leave it at 95%, if I click apply,
this will show our confidence intervals. So I could say in this particular case, and if I click OK, it's actually going to place it here. So I could say, based on my study, I'm 95% confident that everyone enjoyed the Bridget Jones Diary between their arousal fell between 12 and 18, for instance. And the same with Memento. I'm 95% confident that the mean psychological arousal for Memento occurred between 22 and 28, for instance. So based on this particular study, you can clearly see that the participants enjoyed Memento more than the Bridget Jones Diary. So what if we want to do a clustered bar chart? We can have different groups in our bar chart. So right now we're looking at all of the participants. What if we want to break it down by gender? What if we want to compare female and males in each group? So that's where our clustered bar charts come in. So let's go back to Chart Builder. We're under our bar chart, but let's select clustered bar instead. So we're going to double click on cluster bar. So we need the name of the film. We're going to drag it here. Okay. Again, we have our psychological arousal we're going to put here. Now we have our third grouping. So our third grouping we're going to place here, cluster on X. So we're wanting to break it down by gender. So if I take gender and drag and drop to here, again we have our mean here, so that's good. And let's go ahead and display those error bars also. And notice how easy is this? It's just literally a click of the checkbox. We have our confidence interval at 95%. I click I, and when I click OK, here it is in SPSS. Now, when you're ready to, so the instructions in your assignment says that you need to copy and paste your output to a Word document, and all it is, once I click on this, I can right click on it, I can copy it, and I can open up my Word document, paste, and there it is. Very, very easy. So now that we've compared, now we have we're looking at an additional grouping variable between males and females. So looking at Bridget Jones' Diary, it looks like males enjoyed the chick flick, this particular chick flick more, as well as Memento. They're very, very similar, very close here, but again, males have a higher, they've enjoyed this movie a little more than women. Our third graph that we're going to create a simple scatter plot. Now remember, a scatter plot, we're looking for two variables. It's going to be continuous data. Okay? So for this particular example, a psychologist was interested in the effects of exam stress on exam performance. So we're looking to see, is there a relationship between having stress and how well you're performing on the exam. So let's go back to Blackboard, and we are going to open up this particular data set, exam anxiety. Let's open this up. Okay. So for exam anxiety, let's look at the data. Let's look at the different variables here. So code, it just looks like these are the participants. And we can actually look and see what each of these variables are again. So code, remember that label is really good to have because it gives us that description, that it's much more descriptive of what that variable is. So it's just basically each participant has a participant code. Let's see, revise, if I look at this, it says time spent revising. Okay, so time spent revising on the exam. Exam is exam performance, okay, by the percent. So this is their score on the exam. And anxiety, how much anxiety they had while taking this exam. And then gender, we have our grouping variable, 1 for male and 2 for females. So let's create a scatter plot that shows the relationship between anxiety and their testing performance. So let's go to graphs again. And here's our chart builder. And now we want to click scatter plot, and if I just place my arrow over it, it's going to show simple scatter plot. So I'm going to double click simple scatter plot. Now for your X and Y axis, your Y axis here needs to be the dependent variable. What was the outcome that was being measured? What was being measured here? We were measuring their exam performance. So this is the outcome, because remember, something influenced something else. So that anxiety was the independent variable, and that influenced their exam performance. So the dependent variable here is exam performance, and exam anxiety is going to go here. So your y-axis will be the independent variable. So we have both of our variables here. We can go ahead. Well, I don't think it really matters for this, but we can just leave it as mean. And we will click OK. And here is the scatter plot for this particular data set. So notice that the majority of these students, look at their exam anxiety. Look how anxious these students are. The majority of the data fall on this side, on this end of the spectrum. So most of the students suffered from high levels of anxiety. Okay, there's a few who are, there are some who are low, who were not anxious at all, who were not very stressed, but the majority fall on this end. So there's no obvious outliers really, because they're just kind of all clustered together, because there are a few here, but there's not just a couple who are standing here alone. So it seems like there is a general trend here. So the higher the anxiety, the lower their performance. Okay, so notice this cluster of scores right here: high anxiety, pretty low exam performance. Okay. Notice these students here, though, that did perform very well, that their scores were really high. their anxiety, their stress levels were much lower. Much lower. Now, one other tool that we can use, we can actually use a regression line. A regression line helps to summarize the data, helps to summarize the relationship between the two variables. So let's go ahead and create, if I double click on this particular graph, there is a symbol here that we can click on that will allow us to create our scatter plot. That will allow us to create our regression line. If I can find it, well, it's grayed out right now. Let's see. Let me figure out why it's grayed out. Okay, so let's go back for a second. I did make a mistake here. Let's go back into graphs, into the chart builder. And earlier I said, oh, well, let's just use mean. The default was actually on value, and that's what it needs to be on. So make sure that your statistic is on value, because we want to look at, we're not comparing means here of the two variables. We're looking at the actual values, because all of these points that are plotted are actual values from each participant. So I click on OK. So basically this means that this particular participant, scored about a 90% on their exam, and they had 0 exam anxiety. This person right here had about 95, they had about 95 on their exam anxiety. That's how anxious they were, and look how low they scored. They scored about 10 on their exam. So make sure that it's on value, not mean. Now I can double click on it, and here is my little symbol to add fit line at total. Okay, that fit line is what our regression line is going to be. Okay, and it just automatically applied it for us. So this regression line here represents the overall mean of the data set. So sometimes it can be a straight line, it can be a quadratic model or a cubic model, so on and so forth. So this particular situation, it's straight lines, is where the mean falls. Those were the examples for histograms, for bar charts, and for scatter plots. I hope that you were able to successfully create these examples in SPSS, and your homework, you will be creating similar graphs and interpreting them. So good luck, and I look forward to seeing your products.